Tale of Two Cities, published in 1859, is a historical drama written by Charles Dickens. The backdrop of the novel takes place in London and Paris prior to the French Revolution. The novel, told in three parts, has been adapted into numerous productions for film, theater, radio, and television. In 1775, a banker named Jarvis Lorry travels to Dover, where he meets a young, half-French woman named Lucy Minette. Together, the pair travel to Paris to recover her father, Alexandre Minette. Once a successful doctor, Minette was, for unknown reasons, imprisoned 18 years ago in the infamous Bastille prison. He has now been released and is in the care of a former servant named Ernest Defarge, who now runs a wine shop in the impoverished Saint-Antoine district of Paris. Dr. Minette's long imprisonment has left him in a bad psychological state and he is largely unaware of his 5 years later. Lucy and Minette, now largely recovered, are witnesses in a treason case in London. The defendant is a young Frenchman named Charles Darnau, whom they initially met on the crossing from Calais. It initially seems likely that Darnau will be convicted of being a French spy, but at the last moment Darnau's legal team asks whether Darnau might have been misidentified by a witness. To prove the plausibility of this, one of the lawyers, a man named Sidney Cardinal, stands up, revealing himself to look very much like Darnau. Over the next several months, Darnau and Cardan pay several visits to the Minettes at their London home. Both men fall in love with Lucy, but where Darnau is hardworking, courteous, and noble, Cardan is a cynical and depressed alcoholic. Darnau and Lucy eventually become engaged, while Cardan, in confessing his love for Lucy, swears that he would give his life to keep her and those she loves safe. Meanwhile, change is underway in France. Shortly after his trial, Darnau had visited his uncle, who is revealed to be a corrupt and cruel nobleman of the Marquis Saint-Aramon. On the night of Darnau's visit, however, the Marquis was killed by the father of a peasant boy he had run over with his carriage earlier that day. The man of Sparta is arrested and executed, but the events surrounding the murder generate further interest in a revolutionary society headed by Defarge and his wife Therese. Darnau and Lucy marry, with Dr. Minette's permission, although Minette suffers a brief relapse after learning Darnau's true name. 3 years after the French Revolution begins, Darnau receives a letter from a man named Gabelle, whom he had entrusted with the disposal of the Aramon property after Darnau himself renounced it. Gabelle is now accused of aiding an immigrant aristocrat who has fled France and asks Darnau to come to Paris and speak for him. Darnau, trusting in his record of sympathy with the French peasantry, agrees. When he arrives in Paris, however, he is arrested and placed in La Force prison. Lucy and Dr. Minette quickly follow Darnau to France, and Minette's imprisonment under the French monarchy has made him a national celebrity there, and he hopes to use this public sympathy to secure Darnau's release. Even as France descends deeper into violence, it appears that Minette may be successful. A little over a year after his initial arrest, Darnau appears in court, and Minette's testimony on his behalf secures his acquittal. Later that night, however, Darnau is rearrested. At his trial the next day, a statement written by Minette during his imprisonment is read aloud. It describes how Minette was imprisoned by Darnau's uncle and father because he had treated Darnau as sentenced to death, and even Minette proves powerless to save him as attempts to speak to those in power only cause him to relapse into his traumatized state. In the meantime, however, Cardan has arrived in Paris and devised a plan. Cardan instructs Lorry in Paris attending to his bank's business to ensure that Lucy, her father, and her child leave France the day of the execution of Madame Defarge will seek revenge on the rest of Darnau's family next. He also entrusts his own travel papers to Lorry. Cardan successfully blackmails one of Darnau's jailers, of whom he knows to be an English spy, into allowing him to see Darnau. Once inside the cell, he drugs Darnau and takes his place, while Darnau himself, in the guise of Cardan, leaves Paris with his family and Lorry. Belatedly, Madame Defarge arrives at the Minettes, a former Paris residence, hoping to find and arrest Lucy, only to be killed in a struggle with Miss Pross, Lucy's devoted maid. Meanwhile, Cardan is taken to the guillotine in Darnau's place. After comforting a young seamstress condemned alongside him, Cardan mounts the scaffold. Finally at peace with him. Tale of Two Cities.